Hello and welcome to Hawk Talk. My name is Dave Minich.
And I'm Ellie Wiggin.
Today we are here to discuss the voter ID law. We have a couple of people here today that'll help us discuss it. Here with us, Mr. Abrami. He is an Exeter, Stratham, and Northampton representative and is a member of the Ways and Means Committee and is running for re-election in the newly formed Stratham district. He is a 29-year resident of Stratham and is a partner in the healthcare operations firm that he has been with for 38 years. He has a bachelor's and master's degree in industrial engineering operations and has research from the University of Buffalo. Mr. Moyer has a bachelor's degree in zoology and is a graduate from the University of New Hampshire. He has attended 2 National Science Foundation Summer Institutes in ecology and field biology out of Western Michigan University and Sonoma State College, California. He has lived in Exeter since 1971.
So to start things off, Mr. Abrami, what exactly does the voter ID law say?
Okay, let me give you a bit of a history on this bill. We're in session for 2 years, and back in 2011, the House had a bill, a voter ID bill, that called for a provisional ballot. It did pass the House, it did pass the Senate, but the governor vetoed it. The House overrode the veto, and then the Senate sustained the veto. And it was Russell Prescott, Senator Russell Prescott from Exeter, this district, that was the one vote that blocked it. And the logic was that it was not an operational bill and that there was concerns about the provisional ballot, which meant that we had to wait 3 days before we could call the election, because the people voting that didn't have an ID would have 3 days to produce an ID. So that bill was killed. This past year, 2012, there was another bill, and Russell Prescott, when he voted no, he said he was going to work hard with the clerks, town clerks. He worked with the Town Clerks Association and the Secretary of State's office in Concord, and we hammered out what was the bill that has passed. It passed the House, it passed the Senate. Even though the governor vetoed it this time, the vetoes were overridden. So with the law, the basis of the law is this, and there's 2 pieces. It phases in 2 pieces. Before September 1st, 2013, which would be this election, people who show up to vote will have to produce a photo ID. And there's a broad list of photo ID options. It's a long list, and there is a website, sss.nh.gov, that you can go to see that list of all of the different kinds of ID. It's pretty much all inclusive. I was at State House yesterday, and I stopped by the Secretary of State's office just to chat with the Dave Scanlon, who's the heads up the election division. And I asked him, tell me, how do you envision this working in terms of the flow? And what he said is that what they've instructed towns to do is when a resident comes in to vote, there'll be an initial checkpoint where they'll have to show the ID, and if they don't have an ID, they'll be asked to complete a challenged voter affidavit. And basically what that is you're attesting to the fact that you are who you are. But the reason they've done that is so that to slow up the lines for the people with IDs. And once they sign that affidavit, they go into the normal line and go ahead and vote. So even if you don't have an ID, you will vote, and your vote will count. Okay. Now, you say, where's the teeth in this then? Well, all of these voter affidavits that are challenged voter affidavits go to Concord and to the Secretary of State's office, and they have 90 days. Within 90 days, that's supposed to happen. Then what happens is they will mail out to those people who said they didn't have an ID, just to verify that they are indeed at the address they said they were addressed, that they were domiciled at that address. If they get no response, those that they get no response on, the Attorney General's office will be contacted for potential fraud. So that's the check and balance on that. And in terms of the other provision in the bill is that the Secretary of State's office has provided free vouchers to any citizen that can't afford an ID. And it was just announced 2 weeks ago. You go to your town hall, pick it up, and then you can use that to go to the motor vehicle department to pick up a free voter ID card. Now, After September 1st of 2013, things change a bit, which is not this election, next election cycle. The forms of ID were reduced to a driver's license, whether it's a driver's license from in-state or out-of-state, a non-driver ID, which you can get right now, which has been popularized by the TSA. People who travel don't have license have to get some kind of a document, a U.S. Armed Services ID, or a U.S. passport. So that's not this year, but next time, the next big election, that'll happen. And the other change after 2013 is that you'll have your picture taken as well. And that picture will get attached to the affidavit that goes to Concord. And if you have an objection for religious reasons to not having a picture taken, there's another affidavit for religious exception that you can sign and not have to have your photo taken. So as you can see, there's really no discrimination here. There's really no disenfranchisement, because everybody gets to vote. And if you're honest, there's not a problem. Okay?
Right.
Thank
So
you.
I think you mentioned about the state providing vouchers, because I know I've read how that is a problem in a lot of other states about people not being able to afford it. So the state is providing.
Free.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Moyer, are there any other points you want to add?
Well, student college IDs would no longer be legitimate for the next election. I believe that's accurate.
That's correct, yeah.
So, and I know other states have done that as well. It sounds really simple in order to just go down to the DMV and get a photo taken after you've gotten a certificate from the town clerk. It's not that easy for a lot of people who A, don't have a car, who B, are single family parents or whatever and have childcare issues, no transportation. You know, this state has lousy public transportation, or non-existent virtually. So it sounds good, but there are always people who don't have an opportunity to vote based on some of the rules. In fact, in 2000, actually in this September primary, there were 13,000 voters who indicated they didn't have a photo ID at this point already. So there will be people who are prevented from voting.
No, no, they vote.
Well,
They
there
all
are who,
vote.
if they
They all vote.
if they don't have, they will sign the affidavit.
Yes.
That's true, right. The point is that a lot of these rules actually keep people away from voting. They hear scuttlebutt, they don't obviously go to the Secretary of State's website and download the latest information, so that they think, oh, well, gee, I can't vote unless I A, B, and C, and it may prevent them from voting. I mean, and that's a form of voter suppression. I wanted to say that this whole effort to have voter IDs, photo IDs, and other kinds of election restrictions, this is a national effort. This just came on relatively suddenly in the last few years. And it is not by coincidence. There is voter fraud in this country. There is some voter fraud. There's no question about it. It is minuscule. It's 100,000th of 1% or less than the votes. It substantially, basically, has no impact on the outcome. Allegations of massive voter fraud, which these laws are designed to prevent, they're fairy dust allegations, they're vaporware allegations, groundless allegations, and they're disingenuous. Allegations of voter fraud are just allegations with virtually and practically no substance. There are no significant illegal actions by voters in New Hampshire or in any state regarding elections. There are no substantial illegal actions by voters in New Hampshire or elsewhere. And the proof is in a couple of Attorney General investigations. This was done in 2008. This was done in 2008. This was done in 2010. In 2008, when they sent back letters to people who didn't have a legitimate ID, there were 201 people who voted statewide who the Attorney General's office sent letters out. 10 of them didn't come back. The Attorney General's office investigated every single one of these down to detail. The people's names are listed here, their addresses. Every one of them was legitimate.
Can I
There
just
was either
clarify
a
that?
clerical error,
Would you mind?
or no, just
Okay.
clerical error or election mismatch. Go ahead.
Because there's no voter ID at this point, when the period he's talking about. What he's talking about is registration. And when, right now, you can actually register without an ID. But you have to sign another affidavit that you are who you are. And that then it goes to the AG's office, not the AG's office, it goes to the Secretary of State's office, and they do the similar thing that we're talking about with the voter ID. They
Yeah.
send out,
Yeah.
they send out a letter, postage free, coming back, by the way, to say, do you really live where you said you live? We didn't have an ID saying that you live there, and that's what he's referring to. That only 10 came back. That it didn't come back at all, indicating that there was some potential fraud in saying that they
Right.
lived there. So,
But
what's different than the voter ID? Because people confuse the registration issue with the voter ID issue, and I'll leave it at that.
But the point is that there was no voter fraud. That's the whole point. And in 2010, there were 4 letters that didn't come back out of 49, and they checked them out and they were all fine. So there are errors in our system, our electoral system, but they're typically clerical mistakes, miscounts, name and birth date mismatches, election official errors, database errors, and faulty and sometimes hackable electronic voting machines. That's not what this whole thing is about. Voter ID and photo ID laws are laws searching for a crime. Those crimes don't exist. Voter disenfranchisement and voter suppression, instead, they're the real crimes that we have because there's a national coordinated, largely corporate agenda-driven and Republican orchestrated effort to disenfranchise voters using voter ID, photo ID, and other restrictive voting policies and procedures. Now, New Hampshire is probably best among all the states that are doing these, and there have been 37 states now enacting some voter ID and photo ID laws.
We're going to have to move on to the next question. Thank you both for sharing that. Ellie?
So one other thing, how would you address other means of voter fraud that couldn't be solved with like a photo identification? We can
Yeah,
ask
I just
both
want to
of you. We can
respond to
start.
some
That
of
was-
the other things. And I'll get to why I think there's a potential of fraud is really, when you hear what I have to say, you'll see what I mean. When it comes to that this is a Republican conspiracy, not true, okay? And I'll give you one example. The state of Rhode Island. You know the state of Rhode Island, Democrat House, Democrat Senate, Democrat governor for years and years and years, very Democrat state. They passed voter ID last year. And you know who submitted that bill? An African-American legislator. You know why she submitted that bill? Because she went to vote one day, and the checklist people said, somebody else has already voted in your name. That got her wondering. So it's not a Republican issue. It's an issue of trying to make sure that we preserve the integrity of everybody's vote. Everybody's vote. And Herb already said it. There is fraud out there. Now let me tell you, and I campaign real hard when I campaign, and I go door to door, and any of us can buy for $25, you can buy the voter checklist. You put your $25, you get it electronically. So there's voter checklist, and then there's something else that's available to all politicians, Democrat and Republican, something called Voter Vault. I can find out how everybody that's voting, I can tell you how you vote, not how you voted, but if you voted the last 5 elections, right? Politicians use this to identify what doors to go to. Why waste my time knocking on this door if this person never votes? But this data is out there, okay? Now, in these checklists, these voter checklists are not up to date. Every 10 years, they try to clean them up, and they're not. And this is the most cleaned up every 10 years, the census time. So I go door to door, and I see names. I see Mr. and Mrs. Smith and Mr. and Mrs. Jones on the same address. I go, well, maybe there's 2 couples living together. I get to the door, and they say, well, is it Miss Smith or is it Jones? Oh, the Joneses moved 3 years ago, but they're still on the list. The Smiths live there now. Okay, you say, well, how does this happen? Well, when the state was supposed to happen is that if I move within New Hampshire, town X is supposed to tell town Y that person just registered, and it's supposed to let them know. Sometimes it doesn't happen. Big problem comes when someone moves out of state. No one knows. So these names stay on lists, okay?
Yeah.
Now, if you believe that everybody in the world is honest, first off, you wouldn't need any laws, but two, it's not true. And there are political operatives. I'll say political operatives on both sides, okay? That if I know what I just said about somebody not living there, there's ways of finding out whether people are where they are. So we can easily go to a voter list and identify people who are no longer here and use that name, to hire people, go and vote. So the other thing I want to say is that my constituents, and I talk, when they bring this issue up, most of them say they're happy to see. So most of them tell me, I'm surprised that I wasn't supposed to present a photo ID. They in their daily life today, that's a very common thing. Now, when you go to your bank and you withdraw money, okay, they ask you a photo ID. I've been going to my bank for 30 years. I've known my bank clerks for 20 years, and by name, we know each other, and they still ask me for ID. And you know something, I don't mind, because they're preserving the integrity of my money in my account. The same thing that goes through for all this process does is it preserves the integrity of your vote, that it is indeed you who are asking for that ballot, and it's preserving the integrity that your vote's not being watered down by fraud by others. So that's what this is about. And I'll leave it at that. Oh, by the way, one other thing.
Sure.
And just to get to your point about,
Yeah.
I like her, by the way. We communicate all the time. So this was reviewed by the Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Division, and given a clean bill of health. And this is the Eric Holder's very liberal Obama appointee Attorney General. Not a question asked about this law. It was given a clean bill of health, and that's why it's being rolled out.
Okay.
Certainly in New Hampshire, we tend to do things a little cleaner and nicer than some other states. However, this is clearly taking the big national picture. This is clearly an orchestrated, largely corporate agenda-driven thing by a group called the American Legislative Exchange Council. They provided about half of the bills to state legislatures across the country, 62 bills. Half of them were provided by this group, A.L.E.C. I noticed, Pat, that you're not a member of A.L.E.C., which I'm pleased to find out, but there are about 75 New Hampshire legislators that are. I have the list. So that this is really the new Jim Crow of the South. It's not as blatant, it's still troublesome, and just a couple of examples. In Wisconsin, there were just 14 improper votes out of 3 million. 14 out of 3 million. And I want to give you guys an analogy. And I don't know whether you believe in capital punishment or not. I mean, it's probably irrelevant, but I want to make a point. I want to make an analogy here.
Yep.
Because I don't believe in capital punishment, and some of those that do believe that it's okay if a few innocent people die in pursuit of the law and protecting everybody else from crime.
We'll have to
I
move
don't
on.
believe
Okay.
I don't believe it's appropriate to disenfranchise a single voter in pursuit of trying to make sure that there is no fraud anywhere else. And the type of fraud that voter ID and photo ID prevent is in-person fraud, which virtually doesn't exist in any state. Pennsylvania stipulated that in a Supreme Court case that they're dealing with now. So, I mean, we have obviously difference of opinion. Neither you and I are black, Hispanic, poor, and so we don't have the same problems getting things done from a government that other people may have. So.
Okay.
Well, you know, that's
We're gonna have to-
patronizing,
we're
though.
gonna
And I
have
just
to
tell you,
wrap up.
just because somebody's poor doesn't mean that they want to be a good citizen. Okay? I grew up in a poor family, okay? And my parents would be insulted to hear something like that. That they don't have the capacity, the wherewithal to do what play by the rules.
All I'm saying is there are more impediments to them than there are to other
Okay,
people
we're
of
going to
me.
have
That's-
to
yeah,
wrap
we're
it
gonna have
up
to
for the
drop it.
sake of time here.
Okay.
Thank you both for being here.
So just to recap on the voter ID, it's there is a photo identification, but you can do the affidavit. But
Affidavit.
Yep, after the
Yeah.
so you can get through without a photo identification for
You
this
can
time.
vote without a photo ID, but you're urged to present one.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly in favor of urging people to present them, but you've heard what I feel about the rest.
Right, and that there are some counts of voter fraud, but it's very low. But it's still trying to work out the kinks of the voter identification.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to point out is that this does not impact absentee ballots at
Okay.
all. the absentee process is still the same. So if someone doesn't want to come to the voting place, they don't have to come to the voting place. If they're infirmed or whatever, they still vote. And because you know what? This law, the way this is structured with the affidavit, when you vote absentee, guess what you're doing? You're signing an affidavit
Right.
that's who you
Okay,
are.
we're going to have to wrap it up now.
Okay.
All right.
But thank you both for being here.
Thank you very much.
Our
very
pleasure.
much.
Thank you both.
Yeah.
And next up, we're going to be talking with
Good job.
Mr. Weber about question 1, which will be on the next ballot. So,
I get tag team.
welcome back to Hawk Talk. Today we are here with Representative Abrami, and now we are joined by Mr. Weber to talk about question 1, which will be on the ballot this November in New Hampshire. Mr. Weber is the board president of Granite State Priorities, a nonprofit, nonpartisan coalition of church groups, unions, good government groups, and safety net advocates, including the Episcopal Diocese, the State UCC Congregationalist Conference, the American Friends Service Committee, the State Employees Union, the National Education Association New Hampshire Conference, Every Child Matters New Hampshire, the New Hampshire Citizens Alliance, and the League of Women Voters. He has also served on the boards of several New Hampshire nonprofits and is an independent voter. He has also taught at Phillips Exeter Academy for 40 years. Thank you both for being here again. Mr. Weber, could you please outline what exactly question 1 says and what it proposes?
When you're voting, this is what you'll see at the bottom of the sheet under the last bottom row of the candidates. Question 1, are you in favor of amending the second part of the Constitution to read as follows? The general court, that is the legislature, shall not have the power or authority to impose and levy any assessment, rate, or tax upon income earned by any natural person.
And do you have anything else to add about sort of what that means to the state on a wider level?
I have a number of reasons for intending to oppose it. When I looked at your sheet, it seemed that Representative Abrami would have a chance to speak first.
Okay, absolutely. Mr. Abrami, what exactly does the voter right, or I'm sorry, Mr. Abrami, do you have anything else you would like to add in regards to
No, it simply
question
means, do you want an income tax or not, in
Okay.
plain English.
So-
I voted for it. It required a 60% vote in the House and the Senate for a constitutional amendment to be put on the ballot. And my philosophy is let the people decide, and that's what we're going to do. It's going to require a 2/3 vote of the people to change the Constitution. And, you know, in this state for well over 40 years, governors have taken the pledge. And both candidates this time have both taken the pledge, the Democrat and the Republican. And Governor Lynch for 8 years took the pledge, meaning that they would not support a broad-based tax, whether it be an income tax or a sales tax. And I'll leave it at that at this point.
So, Mr. Weber, do you have anything to add about that?
Oh, I think
Question
so. I see this as about the relationship between the present and the future, because there is no legislation at stake here. In whether this goes up or down in 2012 isn't going to change what's happening in our tax code. So what's at stake is whether we want in 2012 to say to your generation, among others, in 2040, you can't turn to this option no matter what happens between now and 2040. Many people who are against an income tax in 2012 are also against question 1, Republicans as well as Democrats and independents, because they think question 1 disrespects the Constitution by bringing a matter of tax policy into our core foundational framework document. And they have good reason for thinking so. But for me, the core argument is that it's not appropriate, since one can't know what trends, what circumstances, what economic conditions are going to change between 2012 and 2040, say, we ought not to be weighing in with the 2040 legislature at this point. Let me leave it there for a minute.
So,
I thought, sorry, one last thing.
That's all right, yeah.
let the people decide, sure, but it makes the people of 2012 make decisions for the people in 2040, because even though it's not absolute and irrevocable, even though the people in 2040, if there were some total catastrophe that revolutionized the population into wanting to have an income tax, they could repeal this vote. But suppose something somewhat less drastic than that happens, and there are evolutionary changes in economic conditions and circumstances, and the majority of the population comes to decide that an income tax would be an appropriate element in a balanced package of tax reform, say a 1% income tax, which would generate a lot of revenue for the state, excuse me, without being onerous for individuals. At that point, say in 2040, 34% of the people could block the determination of 66% of the people that that was the way to go. I don't see why in 2012 it makes sense for us to try to tell 2040 to do that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Abrami, what would you say to future legislators who are struggling to find enough funding and would maybe want to look at an income tax as an option?
Well, since the founding of our state, we've never had a broad-based tax. And this discussion has come up over and over again over the years, but we always seem to manage. I can remember when Pete Mark did a study 25 years ago, 25 years ago. They said, oh, you know, New Hampshire needs a broad-based tax. No. It's at the core of who we are. We are unique among states. We are probably the best state in the union. You all you have to do is live in other states. I've lived in New York, Massachusetts, Maine, and New Jersey. I've consulted, my consulting business, I've consulted in 40 states. We're the envy of every state in the union. I have clients who tell me, geez, how do you guys do it? And I said, well, we just have our heads screwed on straight. We don't need broad-based taxes here. And you say, well, let's look at the outcomes. And every survey, education of our children, ranked high, and every indicator. Healthcare of our citizens, top of the list every time. Low crime rates, high of the list all the time. Environmental quality, quality of life, always ranked #1. Quality of life. People living below the poverty level, the least number living below the federal poverty level. Every year, they just redid it based on the census. And we're the freest state in the union, okay? And why are we the freest state in the union? Because we have held the ground on tax policy. If you think the government knows how to spend your money better than you, or your local community, because the way our structure is set up, local community is the one that is look at this beautiful high school, okay? How can we do this without an income tax or a sales tax? I mean, how can this be? Well, it is, because we have our priorities set, and we don't waste money in this state. As a state representative, all I have in the House is a seat. I don't have an office, I don't have staff, I don't have a pension, I don't have a salary. We volunteer when we go up there. That's the way it should be, okay? So New Hampshire is the model for other states to emulate. Let me give you one other example. New Jersey, you know, because the big argument you hear all the time is, oh, property taxes are high. Well, property taxes are high, but overall we're ranked lowest, except for Alaska in overall taxing, because Alaska, they have oil wells that they give rebates to their citizens. So we don't have oil wells. So New Jersey, let me use that example. New Jersey never had an income tax. About, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years ago, they said, well, we're going to lower your property taxes. We're going to lower your property taxes if we put an income tax in place. Guess what? We have an income tax now in New Jersey, and we have the highest property tax rates in the union. What do you think got Governor Christie elected? It was that, because the people of New Jersey are so frustrated with, you know, you say 1%, that 1% quickly turns into 2, it turns into 3, and if you think that your money is being spent wisely, that's one thing. And all I tell people all the time is just look at the federal government and the waste, the fraud, the abuse. I tell people, do you really want that in New Hampshire? Do you want that kind of outcome? No, I don't think so. And I'm on Ways and Means. We have a lot of revenue streams in the state, okay? And we always manage to balance our budget and live within our means. And yeah, this was a tough budget year, but as the economy improves, there'll be more revenues and we'll be just fine. And again, in any measure, we are the top state in the union without an income tax or a sales tax. And I would not risk that for anything. And I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Thank you.
Mr.
Wait a
Weber, do you
second.
have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would like to respond to that. Even if everything that Representative Abrami just said were true, and I think in 2012 he would probably, win that debate in the legislature hands down, it's not an argument for changing the Constitution, because we can't assume in 2012 that the conditions in 2040 are going to be the same. If this question passes, it's not only going to take away the possibility of our falling into some kind of spiral where we wind up with a high property tax and a high income tax. It's going to take away other options that involve much more balanced and responsible revenue measures, including a low income tax as one piece of a larger, of a more multidimensional project. It's actually the one way we might actually reduce our property taxes. I've lived in my house for 10 years. The property taxes have gone up almost 50% in that time. On a state level over the last 10 years, the total collections from property taxes have also gone up enormously. Many people around the state are hurting that way, particularly retired people who in retirement have less income than they did when they were working, and who are still paying property taxes that are high and that keep going up, so that they're paying sometimes 20% or more of their income just in their property taxes. We pay property taxes with the same dollars as we would be paying with income taxes. But basically it comes back to time and to the impossibility of knowing what's going to be changing between 2012 and 2040, 2060, 2080. The arguments that oppose an income tax now have more force in 2012. We don't know that they'll have anything like the same force across time in the future. And I don't want to disenfranchise a substantial majority in 2040 or 2060 on the basis of the arguments that Representative Abrami just made.
So that's it.
Yeah, well, thank you both. Thank you so much for being here, both of you. We encourage viewers to get to the polls this Tuesday, November 6th. For more information on these issues, you can go to sos.nh.gov for more information on question 1 or the voter ID law. And don't forget to tune into your local access television station to see a tape of our student forum when we will be visited by former U.S. Congressman Paul Hodes and current New Hampshire State Senate Majority Leader Jeb Bradley. So thank you for watching Hawk Talk.